Thanks. Welcome, everybody, to Senate Education. Welcome back. Moving on to our last few items here. We have now a walkthrough of S-167. And I'm going to ask Ms. St. James to take us through the changes in 167, if you'd be so kind.
Sure, Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. You have draft 5.1 of your committee strike all amendment to S-167, which is your miscellaneous bill. So there were no changes to section 1, the public bids statute. Bless you. No changes to section 2, which is the cleanup of the colleges that are accredited to operate here in Vermont. No change to section 3, which is pushing out the effective date of the emergency operations plan requirement from your school safety bill last year. First change comes on page 4, section 4, lines 13 through 15. So this is, I don't know actually who the recommendation was from, but this was a recommended change from yesterday from someone that was sitting in the audience.
So which page are you on?
We're on page 4, line 13 through 15. This is the requirement that AOE contact all supervisory unions and gather information on whether and where Holocaust education is being taught in the entire curriculum, so pre-K through grade 12. Previous drafts of this language just had AOE with that initial communication, also including Holocaust education resources that they developed with the Vermont Holocaust Memorial. That requirement still remains. It's in a different part of the section now, so we'll get to it. This language requires that the request itself be developed in consultation with the Vermont Holocaust Memorial.
So as it's written to St. James, we're requiring that they consult.
Correct.
It doesn't mean that in the end, if the agency wants to send their own email, they send their own email. They may not take the recommendations or the advice of the Holocaust Memorial.
I think that is accurate in the way this is drafted.
Thank you. Okay.
So if you go to page 5, subsection D, this is where that requirement that AOE provides supervisory union Holocaust education resources that it has developed in consultation with the Vermont Holocaust Memorial now lives. But that date has been extended to January 1, 2026. Previous versions of this draft had the resources going out with the initial communication, which needed to happen on or before December 1 this year. No changes to the virtual learning section. The first section, page 6, I did make a change here. Section 6 is amending the definition of virtual learning. This previously said on line 15 on page 6.
All right. Page 15, line 15 on page 6. Okay.
Yep, this previously said this instruction can take place, and that I just changed it to may.
Okay.
That's a more formal way to say the same thing.
Okay.
And then the next change you cannot see because it's section 7, the home study program.
Yep.
We're at the very bottom of page 6. We're going to go on to page 7. This started with hearings before enrollment, and we removed that language. So now this language just contemplates hearings after enrollment. So anytime there was a place that talked about a hearing before enrollment, I've removed that language. I also, this is a little technical, but I do think you deserve to know that, since this is language that was taken, that was struck last year, repealed last year, and we're putting it back into the same statute, I kept the same subsection. Just for ease of reference. So there is still going to be a hole in that statute where there is a repeal of that before enrollment language, which is not common. We try and squish everything together so that we're not going from B to G, right? A, B, C, D, E. So I just wanted to point that out. But that's the only change. So we took out that hearing for enrollment, and then the effective date remains July 1, 2024.
We're not voting on this today, but I want everybody to have a chance to look at a final copy or close to final copy. Any questions at all at this point?
No question, just an observation. Sure, you get a lot of feedback on the homeschooling.
You have,
Yeah, I did.
yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I think well done overall. Hopefully, this most recent change placates concerns.
Yeah.
I think we'll go forward, but yeah, I was surprised. People are paying.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
You know,
They have a.
like it never happened. The way she did it.
They do have, they have a very strong network, for sure, and it's very interesting, when I was visiting a high school in Notters district on Monday, periodically senators have me to their districts, you guys haven't yet, but it's fine.
We'll solve.
But the principal there, the superintendent said that if you live in New Hampshire, if you want to homeschool, parent writes a note, blah, 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 so-and-so we homeschool, gives the principal, and that's it. So it's just very interesting, you know, we do have some, I don't want people to think we're too loosey-goosey. I mean, we've got some, you know, some good stuff in, and I think this solves another little problem, but I think we're monitoring the situation pretty closely.
New Hampshire doesn't pay for education, same for the.
Yeah. They've got some other interesting things on this guy's. Okay, Miss St. James, to save you a trip back, I don't know if you were thinking about coming back. Let's do it now.
Great.
That's okay?
Yep.
So S 220, Senator Gulick's amendment,
You have that.
and I'm looking to Senator Gulick. There she is, great. Senator Gulick, you mind if we just shift to your amendment now? Save us, it'll allow us all to leave a little earlier than anticipated. I mean, well, we have a couple more things, but,
That's a great idea.
okay, great. So Senator Gulick has amendment S 220, be a floor amendment. She's been kind enough to include all of us. Don't know if everybody's going to want to be included, but I appreciate you putting us all on there. Let's learn about it right now. Senator Gulick, do you want to tee it up and then we'll have Ms. St. James take us through it?
Sure. Yeah, I just would start by saying that basically every library has a selection policy that outlines what kinds of materials they have in their library and usually the rationale behind the choices that they make. So it's, you know, it's something that you can refer to when someone has a question about a book or another item in the library. You can say, well, it's part of our selection policy, and then there's a process that you go through if someone wants to challenge something that you have in your library, and that selection policy is part of that procedure. So this just speaks a little bit to that selection policy, and then it goes on to talk a little bit about the reconsideration of materials, and that's another word for a reconsideration of materials is like a challenge. If someone doesn't like something in a library, they can challenge it, and it goes through this reconsideration process. So this is just kind of laying out for you, specifically for school libraries, what it would look like for someone to reconsider a certain material in a library. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and can you just, actually, this might be for Ms. St. James. This is somewhat similar to what is already in the bill?
No,
No, okay, not at all.
I don't believe so.
Okay. So
Oh,
I thought with other libraries, we had created, and I do apologize, this really isn't your, this
No,
is
but
not
I-
your bill.
I haven't. I
Yeah.
just opened it and
Yeah.
I can correct myself.
I believe there's something in there that's somewhat similar related to public libraries or municipal libraries.
Yes, Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel, it looks like, and I will say, S 220, I am officially covering it today. So,
Ah,
I don't know, I
Okay,
don't know if
alright.
I don't think I'm announcing any news. I'm
okay,
just
okay.
Officially, taking over.
Well, congratulations.
Yes, so it does look like, Section 1 is requiring public libraries to ensure Vermont libraries protect and promote the principles of free speech, inquiry, discovery, and public accommodation. And then section 2 does require public libraries to adopt a policy for the selection and reconsideration of library materials that complies with the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and state laws prohibiting discrimination in places of public accommodation. But it stops there. And this amendment has some more specifics on what needs to be considered in the policy.
Okay, would you take us through then 220, how it, a little bit more about how it differs and
The amendment or the
the amendment?
yes.
Yeah,
So this would be, the amendment to S 220 proposes adding a new section to the bill, which we would just plunk at the very end. And it's adding a section to Title 16. There is no real school library section in Title 16. So I've added this language to the student rights chapter, which contains one statute on freedom of expression. So I thought they kind of go nicely together. This amendment would require each school board and each approved independent school to develop, adopt, and ensure the enforcement of a library material selection policy and procedures for the reconsideration of the materials. The policies and procedures shall affirm the importance of intellectual freedom and be guided by the First Amendment, the American Library Association's Library Bill of Rights and Freedom to Read Statement, and Vermont's Freedom to Read Statement. So I would say that this is consistent with what is in 220 up to line 13 after the First Amendment. S 220 does not mention in any way the American Library Association's Library Bill of Rights or Vermont's Freedom to Read Statement.
okay,
And then subsection B on line 16 kind of goes further to put guardrails on those First Amendment considerations. So in order to ensure a student's First Amendment rights are protected and all students' identities are affirmed and dignity respected, the policy and procedures required under subsection A of this section shall prohibit the removal of school library materials for the following. So you cannot remove library materials for any of these reasons. Partisan approval or disapproval. We're on page 2 now. The author's race and nationality, gender identity, sexual orientation, political views, or religious views. School board members or members of the public's discomfort, personal morality, political views, or religious views. The author's point of view concerning the problems and issues of our time, whether international, national, or local. The race, nationality, gender identity, sexual orientation, political views, or religious views of the protagonist or other characters, or content related to sexual health that addresses physical, mental, emotional, or social dimensions of human sexuality, including puberty, sex, and relationships. So those are all the reasons you can, a library would be prohibited from prohibiting on, right?
yeah, Senator Kulik, would you remind me, because we are gonna have to take some testimony on this, would you remind me the genesis of this a little bit, where it's coming from? Was it part of this part of a study?
Yeah, this is coming from mainly from the Vermont the Vermont School Libraries Association.
Okay.
And I think the genesis is just, as you probably all have been reading, that there's been this real push across the country to ban books in schools.
Yeah,
And so I think this is a response from school librarians to sort of draw a line in the sand and try to be real clear about what what book bans
Yeah.
can and cannot do in schools.
and
And I did talk to the Vermont NEA and they're fine with this language.
do you have, thank you for doing that, I appreciate that. And this is a question, Ms. St. James, I don't know if you're ready to answer it, but I thought we did something like this in 220 that also was working. It might not have been as extensive in terms of the content of the amendment, but was there not something also put in place in 220 that addressed try to address issues of book bans?
See. So you require the use or the development of a policy for selection and reconsideration that complies with the First Amendment, Civil Rights Act, and the Public Accommodations Act,
Mm-hmm.
full stop. Right, there's nothing else there. And then the bill does require or allow, it gives a duty to the Department of Libraries, saying it may develop a model policy or shall adopt a collection development policy that reflects Vermont's diverse people and history, including diversity of race, ethnicity, sex, gender, identity, sexual orientation, disability status, religion, and political beliefs. But that, as close as we get, I believe.
And Senator Gillick, do you happen to remember why, well, I'm not gonna even say if she opposed it, we'll have Catherine in tomorrow. This isn't on the floor until Wednesday, so we'll just hear from Catherine, and if the committee wants to hear from anybody else. What I'm looking for, Senator Gillick, is if there's a way that we can sort of be consistent all the way through. That's what I'm kind of looking for.
Right,
There may not be a
so
way to do that.
when I spoke to Catherine, this summer or fall, when we were developing some legislation around libraries, she wasn't, because I wanted to do a ban on book bans, which some states in the country have done.
Right.
She didn't feel comfortable with that, just because as a librarian, as the head of library, she really feels like she doesn't want to put any kind of a ban on free speech, even when it's a ban, when someone's wanting to ban something. So I understood that. And I agreed with her, and she feels comfortable being able to handle folks who want to ban books in the state. Now, school librarians are in a different position, just because, as I said earlier, they're just being bombarded by folks wanting to ban books in schools. And as we've talked about before, they are understaffed, they're under-resourced, and I think they feel like they just want a little bit more strength behind what can and cannot constitute a challenge or the banning of a book in a school.
Great. Okay, that's helpful. And do you have a name if we reach out to the Vermont School Library Association?
Well, we had, let's see, Rebecca Sofferman was in early on, as was Charles Dabritz.
Do you mind emailing those names to Ben? And
Sure.
get them on for tomorrow? Just so
Will
we
do.
can have some testimony, that'd be great.
Okay.
Okay, and I interrupted, you still had, I believe, one little bit left.
Yes, one subsection left on page 2, line 12.
Mhm.
Requires that the policy and procedures that school districts and approved independent schools are developing shall ensure that certified school library staff are responsible for curating and developing collections that provide students with access to a wide array of materials that are relevant to students' research, independent reading interests, and educational needs, as well as ensuring such materials are tailored to the cognitive and emotional levels of the children served by the school.
Okay. Great. All right, so we'll take a little testimony tomorrow. Senator Gulick. If it's not too much trouble, we need to see you because Senator Weeks had to step out.
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, yep. No problem. Yep.
Like, just so we've got you. Great. Okay, so this sounds great. Thanks for your work on it. We'll take a little more testimony tomorrow, maybe vote it out tomorrow or Tuesday. Doesn't make any difference to you, I don't think, as long as it's ready to go by the time we get on the floor. I think it'll be on notice on Tuesday, up on Wednesday. Great. Okay, great. Thank you, Senator Gulick.
Thank you, Senator Campion.
We are now moving on. At 2:45, we have homeschooling annual assessments with an Alexis Perkins. Is Mr. and Mrs. Perkins?
Yeah, Just joined.
Great,
Should be available.
great, thanks. Yeah, thanks a million.
Absolutely, I'll see you all
And
tomorrow.
thank you for your follow-up on the amnesty stuff. That was great. Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Quite welcome. See you
Forgot about-
tomorrow.
Yes, thank you.
Bye, Beth. Thank you.
I hope you feel better.
Thanks.
It's a little clunky here in a way, Senator Hewlett. You know, we're kind of getting close to the end of the work, you know, before a crossover. I mean, it's a good clunky. I think we're in good shape. But yeah, we've had some, we've had some spaces, some free time, which I think is good.
This is pretty smooth sailing, Senator Campion.
I think we're gonna be okay. Okay, just wait until Senator Lucy leaves and we'll get started on the Caledonia stuff. Okay, Ms. Perkins, thanks so much for joining us.
Hello,
Nice to see you.
thank you.
Ms. Perkins, we have, first of all, thanks for coming. You wanted to weigh in on the homeschooling annual assessments. I think you'll be happy to know, or maybe you won't. I'll let us know. We have made some, you had reached out because you were concerned that that we might not put some kind of annual assessment back in place. And now we have put some language back in place. But we're interested in hearing your experience as a homeschool parent and your general thoughts. So the floor is yours.
Sure. Yeah, I emailed because, well, originally because last year it was in limbo because they just changed the rules. And so last year we were allowed to submit them if we wanted to. And so I did. And then this year we received word that we couldn't submit them even if we wanted to, which I didn't enjoy hearing. And so then we received word that this was up for debate again, and that we could, email people if we wanted to. And so I did, because I know from experience from talking to people in the homeschool community that there are very few, if any, people on my side of the table that would prefer to have some type of end of the year assessment. And so I sent emails saying that I would prefer. And so I'm not sure if you've read my email or not, but, really the reason I would prefer is, one, is that I think without any type of assessment. Right now, I think the rule has changed or was changed. I'm not sure what updates have been made with new language, but the rule is currently that we basically just declare we're going to homeschool, which to me feels like it leaves it up to the possibilities, at least in the community, not individually, to educational neglect. There's no oversight, you have no idea what's going on, and with no supervision for kids, which worries me as a citizen of the community. But also on an individual level, I really don't love the idea that there isn't a third party lending legitimacy to all the hard work and education that I'm giving my children. And I know that, I know I'm making the choice to homeschool and opting out of the public school system, but I did like being able to send in a portfolio, which was one of 3 options, and having the state put their stamp on it and saying, good job, you've met our requirements. You have legitimized, the education that I have provided my children. And I didn't like the idea of not having any type of third party, especially in, the education board, saying that I've done what I'm supposed to do. And I didn't want to unintentionally close doors for my children farther down the road, especially because mine are getting to high school age soon. And I don't want to close doors for them by saying, like, well, what have you done with them for the last 12 years? Well, here's the letter that says, hey, they've been enrolled. But well, what have they done? It's like, well, if you have long enough, I can sit down and show you all of their work. But it's very different than saying, hey, here's a series of letters that says every year you've done what they're supposed to do. They've made progress. You've done your job as their educator. And to me, that's a much better idea than just saying, yeah, we can give you a letter that says that they've been enrolled. Well, that's not really lending any legitimacy to what I've been doing.
So just to clarify, Ms. Perkins, up until when was the last time you submitted a portfolio and received feedback from AOE? Because one of the things that we heard, and committee members will correct me if I'm wrong, that the agency has not had the wherewithal, if you will, to review portfolios for several years now.
I'm not sure about that because I've done one every year.
Okay.
And I did one at the end of the last school year, which was, you know, the COVID years.
Yeah.
And I had zero problem. I've always had zero problem. I actually submitted it. I'm
Ms.
sorry,
Perkins,
go ahead.
That's okay. Zero problems, meaning the agency wrote back indicating they've reviewed the portfolio, this, that, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I actually submitted it as one of the exhibits, just in case all of you,
Yes, we did get that. Thank you.
weren't familiar. My children, you know, I have been homeschooling them for the entirety of their education. They're not in and out of the homeschool system or the public school system. So this is there. We do have three options. We can do a teacher assessment. We can do standardized testing. Some are approved, and portfolio. In the homeschool community, portfolios are largely considered the most labor intensive.
Mhm.
To me, I find them the easiest. They also, to me, are most demonstrative of the work, but we do have requirements. Obviously, this is just a very small sampling of what they do in the school year, but they don't want us to overwhelm the homeschool office. And so they have us just give a small sampling of what we do, but at least it shows them progress. So what we do is we send stuff from the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and the end of the year, so they can see progress. And so that's what we do. And so that's what I've always done. So the last one I did was at the end of the last school year. And so when I got the most recent email that said, you can't do that anymore, I was left with basically with the problem to solve of, well, how am I going to legitimize this school year that I'm currently in? And so I've been looking up standardized testing that I can do. Should I do a teacher evaluation? Because I don't love I'm still going to make a portfolio for them so that I have it for my records, but I would love a third party to say, good job, you've done it. Here it is.
Yeah.
Here's our letter.
One of the things that was floated by me in the hallway with some folks was the idea, and we won't have time to do it now, but we do have another bill coming to us that if the committee wanted to, was this idea of standardized tests and saying, all right, everyone in the state should be taking tests. Right now, homeschool students aren't. Again, I'm not saying we're moving in this direction. Homeschool watching, don't need any emails. But what do you think of that idea?
So, I was talking about this last night with my husband, and I was saying that, I understand the resistance to, the hoops to jump through. I get it. However, to me, the most important thing is that my children are educated and that I don't close any doors for them. So if the hoops that I have to jump through are standardized testing to make sure that all options are available to them, that's the hoops I'm going to jump through. Standardized testing are probably not my favorite because some kids are good at them and some are not good at them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I love that we have three options to choose from because children are so diverse. And I loved that we have three options, but to have zero options, I don't love. And I think that you're really taking away, supervision that is really necessary. And the pushback that I keep hearing from homeschool parents are, well, they're easy to fake. They don't give, they're really not catching things that you think they are. And, not to dramatize it, but I really feel like it's the same argument that people who are against gun control use. It's like, well, because they're not catching everybody who are doing bad things, we should just do nothing at all. It's like, well, let's try and catch as many problems as possible. Let's try and help as many people as possible and put the system in place that will control and help and supervise as many children as possible. Because I hate the idea of some kids being victim of educational neglect just because there are some parents that don't want to put the work into this. Because really, they're not that much work. And I do the hardest one every year.
Senator Gulick, who's on Zoom, I think you probably can see her. She has a question or a comment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I-
Yes.
No, that's okay. I just want to say, I said this the other day, a couple days ago, as clearly as I possibly could. I completely agree with Ms. Perkins. I think it's really important that homeschool students and families be held accountable, and that we have some kind of a record of achievement. It's real basic for me.
Yes.
So thank you.
100%.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Perkins, and we can continue this conversation for sure. We go through something that we're going through right now called crossover. So all of our bills have to cross over to the House, so we have to vote them all by tomorrow. But we're getting a House bill where we can, if the committee would like to, we may have you back in to help us navigate these waters a little bit, address this a little bit more in another bill. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Great.
great.
Thanks. And I actually did read your comments. Somebody had posted them about them being, we should hold homeschool parents accountable and not shy away from giving them too much work. And I was very happy to see those comments.
Thank you. Yeah, I think my words were, it's not our job to
Yes.
right. to make sure that families don't have work to do. Like that's not,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, that's not.
Yeah,
our
I read those
purview.
out loud to my husband and I was like, I don't know who that is, but I would like to speak to her.
Thank you.
So I 100% agree with that. But if you're going to sign up to homeschool, you should be willing to do all the work. Otherwise, you should just send your kids to public school. And that's what I really hate about removing this, is that it feels to me, just opting out of all of the work. And I feel like that's opening it up for problems and for kids to slip through the cracks. And I don't want that to happen.
I appreciate this, Ms. Perkins.
And I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Yeah, and we will be, I wouldn't be surprised if we're back in touch in a couple of weeks as we continue the conversation.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Great to see you.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Jay Johnson, are they coming in? Do you know what their story is?
No one is in the Zoom.
All right, we'll just take 5 minutes. We'll go off and we'll try.